Hey guys, I'm gonna do a quick reaction video here to the mock draft we just did, give my thoughts on each team, and hopefully it's helpful. So we'll start off actually at the end instead. So we had David, Aki, myself, and Waldrop drafting this one. So Waldrop drafted from the 14th spot. We'll start with him. So he grabs Devontae Adams, Deebo Samuel in the first two rounds, locking up his wide receivers. They finished like wide receiver 1 and 3 or something like that on the year last year. So if they repeat that, obviously those are stellar starting wide receivers. Adams is a little older, so we're already seeing a team that maybe is thinking about competing now. Deebo's 26, so I think Adams, what is he, 28, 29? He's 29. Okay, so not a ton of years left for Devontae Adams to be like that top elite receiver. He follows that up with a really nice Aaron Jones pick that I actually wanted. So that Aaron Jones pick in the third round makes a lot of sense if you're a contender. He's got to lock up some running backs. Unfortunately for him, by the time it gets back, Elijah Mitchell is on the board as the best running back. And to be competitive, you got to have good running backs. I don't know. Right here, it feels like maybe the strategy doesn't work as well. To me, Mitchell could get replaced pretty easily in that offense. So it's always scary for me drafting him super high. Um, but that's just like personal preference. I sniped Zeke, and even though Zeke is an aging dynasty asset, this team would look 1,000 times better in my mind if Zeke was replaced with Elijah Mitchell. So he follows that up with the Marquise Brown pick. I think Marquise Brown's going to kill it for Hollywood's going to be amazing for the weeks that Hopkins are out. Hopkins is out, so we'll see how the offense flows with both of them on the field. But he should be a great flex play, as is Kareem Hunt or Allen Robinson. I'm fairly certain auto draft may have kicked in in round 8, so it's hard to really judge the picks after that. We're just gonna pretend it didn't. But James Robinson is a fine pick as a fourth running back. He's already running with the ones. It seems like he's back from his Achilles injury. So that could be a really nice pick value in the 8th round. Grabs my boy Jahan Dotson. Really like Dotson. I think he's going to be good in a year or two. Probably not for a contender. You wouldn't want to start drafting rookie wide receivers. John Mechie, similar situation. I mean, John Mechie, you should not draft right now. I'm going to say that again. I said that in the last video. Don't draft him. He is not going to play this year. He has cancer, so might not want to draft him at all. And then follows that up with Tua, Jelani Woods, and Malik Willis. So Tua could be, I mean, you can see you can in the 11th round, you can get a quarterback that could easily finish in the top 15. What that ends up doing when you look at his team, you got Tua, Aaron Jones, Mitchell, Devontae Adams, Deebo Samuel, Jelani Woods, Marquise Brown, Kareem Hunt. I think obviously like the tight end situation is a problem for Waldrop. I think he would have liked to have drafted maybe in that 7th spot a Dallas Goedert instead, and then maybe gotten an Allen Lazard later, something like that, instead of Jahan Dotson. I think that team would be a lot more balanced, then have a lot more options. I think if you just look at the bench for Waldrop here, he's got Allen Robinson and James Robinson. Outside of that, pretty rough. But he could have. No, I guess I'm not saying that right. He has a good bench right now. He has 2 bench players who are startable. He could have converted that into a good, or at least a a usable tight end here, and I think that would help. We're not starting that many players in this league. We have 8 teams, so that's kind of what I'm thinking. Go on to me. I'm in the 13 slot. I get Dalvin Cook and Joe Mixon with my first 2 picks, already signaling like, hey, I'm trying to win now. That was my build. overall. You really shouldn't go into a draft with like a build in mind, but if something falls in your lap, then go for it. Dalvin Cook was there, and I thought, you know what, let's try that. So Cook and Mixon ought to be top 10 running backs. I mean, I expect maybe even top five. So I feel really good about those picks. T. Higgins on a points per game basis last year, he was really, really good. So I'm expecting him to be a top 10 wide receiver this year. Expecting big things from Joe Burrow. So that's if I'm saying Higgins is going to be a wide receiver one, obviously Chase is going to be a wide receiver one, barring injury. So really expecting a lot from Burrow this year. Next pick is Zeke. He's probably only got a year or two left. Before he's pretty irrelevant in the league, much like Dalvin Cook. So this team has got a short window. I've got T. Higgins here, who will be relevant for a long time. He's a young receiver. Um, Godwin, not that young, but not old. He's just had some injuries. DeAndre Hopkins is old at this point. So this is an older team for sure. But I like the fact that I was able to get 3 wide receivers that I feel like could finish in the top 15 with Higgins, Godwin, and Hopkins, and 3 running backs that could finish in the top 15 with those guys. That sets me up pretty well in a league where we only start 8. We're trying to get an advantage in our starting lineup. If I'm trying to win now, those are really helpful. I think probably the interesting pick that I made is in the 7th round. Interesting is a word, depends. You might think it's stupid. Trey Lance was here, so I went and grabbed him. I think with his rushing upside, there's like no way he finishes worse than like a QB 15. Um, but as you can see, if you feel like there's a catastrophe on the horizon, you can use one of your later picks for a guy like Kirk Cousins in the 12th round. I'm surprised he fell that far. I'm assuming maybe Waldrop would have picked him. Uh, Maybe not. I don't know where auto draft came into play for Waldrop. So, um, but you can cover yourself with a quarterback that you're pretty sure will finish like low end QB1, QB2 numbers. I ended up picking Ertz. He's only got a year or two left. So when you think about this team's prospects, I'm really hoping that Trey Lance pops off. If he pops off and is a top 5 quarterback, I really like this team. If he's terrible, I've got Kirk Cousins, and I've got my 2023 first that I can trade for whatever I want to bolster the team. I got to go all in because my team only has a year or two left to be relevant. That's how I started my draft, which is crazy in Dynasty when you think about it. I'm only giving myself a year or two to compete. All right, so let's take a look at Team 10, which is Aki. For some reason, I guess he left the draft, and so it doesn't show his name there. Aki starts out with Kyle Pitts and Josh Allen. So Aki's thinking about the long term here. He's locked up 2 picks for a long time. Tight end never has to think about it again in our league until like 10 years from now, almost 8 years from now, something like that. Quarterback doesn't have to think about it for a long time. Josh Allen is going to be good forever. All right, so now here's where I start having some questions about this draft. Round 3, getting Saquon Barkley. Um, looking at the players after him, I get the reason you pick Saquon. He has top 10 upside easily. He could be the RB1 on the season. If you're swinging for the fences, this is not a bad move. Who else could you have picked? You could have picked like a Mike Evans if you're trying to win now. But I don't think that's what you're signaling with Kyle Pitts and Josh Allen. Really, you're trying to win in a year or two, maybe. You punt your running backs and you get your wide receivers. Here's the thing. I would much rather, with this 3rd round pick, you pick a wide receiver like Michael Pittman, Deontay Johnson, Terry McLaurin. Mike Evans doesn't really fit your build. But you follow that up with a DJ Moore pick and then Rashad Bateman. So I really like those 2 picks a lot for your team. It's just like Saquon, I get it. Huge upside. And if he hits, then maybe this team is competitive. But the thing is, are you really expecting DJ Moore and Rashad Bateman to be wide receiver ones this season? I think DJ Moore could be a low end wide receiver one. Rashad Bateman, it's questionable, right? We have no idea how that's going to turn out. They traded Hollywood for a reason. Could he be a wide receiver one? Maybe, maybe not. But you've got yourself locked up a QB1, tight end one, and hopefully an RB1 in your mind with Saquon Barkley. Um, so it feels like you're kind of waffling on the strategy a little bit with when you go with a Barkley pick. You might as well, in my mind, go all in and just say, all right, I'm going to grab Michael Pittman. Like, he looked pretty good last year. He'll be good for years. Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, like that. Those kind of guys are going to stick around on your team forever. Um, and then you can fill in running back later. But not a bad pick. It's the only one that I look at here and go, I'm not so sure. You got Miles Sanders later. I mean, you could have gone Darnell Mooney. Maybe I do kind of like the Mooney pick, maybe a little better, but it just depends on how much you think of that Chicago dumpster fire of an offense. He might be a wide receiver one for several years, but does he really have that skill set? I don't know. I don't hate it. Miles Sanders, criminally undervalued. So now we're looking at, Gabe Davis, Ramondre Stevenson. These are upside kind of picks. I'm not a huge Stevenson fan, but a Gabe Davis fan for sure. And Kadarius Toney, that's a great grab, round 9 for your kind of team. Zamir White is kind of an investment, right? Maybe eventually he turns out to be the RB1 next year for starting running back. I mean, I throw around RB1. When I'm talking about RB1, I'm talking about like a top 14 running back in fantasy. What I meant to say there is Zamir White will be the starting running back likely next year for the Raiders once Josh Jacobs is let go. So that's kind of a long-term pick. Maybe you're doing the same thing with Ramondre Stevenson, but I very much like, a Rashad White, James Robinson, Tyler Algier pick better than him personally. David Bell is also a good long-term pick. Zach Wilson fell pretty far, so I get that pick. You might as well that this is auto draft likely what happened down here, so I'm not going to analyze it too much. But overall, I like the team. I just think the Saquon Barkley pick, you could have really solidified your direction of the team by just loading up on wide receivers here and saying, I'll figure out running back later and just have studs at wide receiver, tight end, and quarterback. That's kind of what they call a productive struggle. You're not gonna win unless you have multiple RB1s on your team. That's just like how it goes in Dynasty. Unless I guess anything can happen. But all right, and then let's take a quick look at David's team. So David drafted in the 4 hole here. He grabs Christian McCaffrey, which is like, hey, I'm trying to win now. That's a win now move. McCaffrey, how old is he? He's 26. He's probably got a few years left of relevancy. Mark Andrews, excellent pick, young, good tight end. He is 26. He's got plenty of years left of being a solid tight end, and he's the main target on that offense. Michael Pittman, young receiver. Traylon Burks, young receiver. Russell Wilson. All right, so and in my mind, this is like all over the place, and it's hard for me to judge what the strategy is. Basically, what you're trying to do with the startup draft is give your team some direction. Um, maybe you're picking players that you like, which is totally fine. But basically, what you're betting here is, let's say Pittman is a top 15 receiver. He was good last year. He could easily be a top 15 receiver this year. That's a possibility. Traylon Burks, do you think that he's just going to walk in and be AJ Brown and be a top 15 receiver? That's a bet as well. So you've got 2 players right there that may not be top at their position, right? Unlikely they're top 5 at their position. You've got Mark Andrews and Christian McCaffrey, who are top players at their position. Then you grab Russell Wilson, who older quarterback, not much time left of relevancy for Russell Wilson in fantasy. So it's hard for me. Like if you were grabbing young receivers and a young quarterback who's really good and a young tight end, something like that. If I were making suggestions, that might be more helpful. To me, you could have gone like Mike Evans instead of Michael Pittman. But that's like splitting hairs a little bit. The Traylon Burks pick is really the one that doesn't make a lot of sense. You could have picked Leonard Fournette. Like, look at this team, how much better it would be if you pick Leonard Fournette here. and then wait a little bit on quarterback. Instead of going Russell Wilson, you could have grabbed his receiver, Jerry Jeudy, there, or Amari Cooper or Cortland Sutton, whoever you want there to solidify your flex spots. Let's just look at David's team here. So you can see his starting lineup, right? So he's relying on Michael Pittman and Burks. I think Pittman's a starter on any team, right? So he's relying on Burks, Ayuk, Singletary as his starters. Like maybe he could throw in. He's got Lockett, Robert Woods on his bench as possible bench players. But he's also got his RB2 is Pollard. Like this team needs a second running back if it's going to compete right now, which is what Christian McCaffrey, Russell Wilson kind of signals. When you grab those guys, you're like, oh, I want to win now. But like Tony Pollard is not going to help you win now. Treylon Burks is unlikely to help you win now as a rookie. Like keep in mind that a rookie is only going to get you at, okay, unless they're Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase, they are unlikely to get you even wide receiver 2 production, like top 28 production in our league. A good year for a wide receiver as a rookie is like 800 yards and 6 touchdowns. Like that's not what you're looking for. You can get that much cheaper later in the draft. You paid up for this 4.5 pick here of Treylon Burks, and he's unlikely to net you like a lot of production. So it's kind of like McCaffrey and Wilson and Mark Andrews, they're all gonna, they're gonna score you a bunch of points this year, but then the rest of your roster is gonna like maybe score you some points, maybe not. Pittman probably will score you some points, and it's gonna be hard to compete with this team. I also don't see it as like a complete rebuild kind of view here because you've got McCaffrey. So what you could do to kind of fix this team in my mind is I would trade off McCaffrey and Russell Wilson for future picks, maybe get some young prospects at wide receiver because wide receivers are cheap, and then kind of start your rebuild from there. But that's how I would do it. I would definitely, if you're trying to be competitive, grab some more running backs. So guys like, we can look at the draft again here from David I guess he was in the 5 spot. You know, try and get guys like Gibson or Dobbins instead of Michael Pittman, or you could have gotten Leonard Fournette and James Conner. Like, just replace Pittman and Treylon Burks with Leonard Fournette and James Conner, and then figure out wide receivers after that. You could have grabbed guys like Hopkins, Juju. You could have grabbed. I mean, Ayuk is fine as your wide receiver 2, maybe. Cooks would have been fine as your wide receiver 2. Like, if you were going for a starting I'm going to win now strategy, grabbing those 2 win now running backs of like Connor and Fournette would make this team terrifying year 1 and like give you a really good shot to peak at the right time. That's what we're trying to do. Peak at the right time here and win at win now. You're going to be mad at yourself later in the year when you're holding on to a rookie who, maybe they show some promise, but they're not winning you the league right now. And then the rest of your core, like McCaffrey and Wilson, are just getting older and worse. And so that's just my thoughts on it. Like maybe this team could win now, and Burks pops off, Zeke gets hurt. The Indiana offense looks great, and Pittman's a wide receiver 1. Like that is in the cards. I just find it unlikely. Like compared to my team, I'm not trying to brag here, but like compared to my team, what am I betting on? Well, I'm betting on Dalvin Cook being a top running back. Yes, he will be. You have McCaffrey, very similar. I'm betting on Joe Mixon being a top running back, Zeke being a top running back. Like those guys have proved it in the past. That's what you pay for with these dynasty picks with the vets. You pay for their production, right? But youth starts being an aspect here, and what you've done is you've mixed in your youth with what you're paying in your startup picks. You're paying for that youth of Michael Pittman and Treylon Burks, when in reality you can go like, okay, I don't care how old they are. I just want to win now. Give me guys who are going to score points now. Hopefully that was helpful. That's kind of how I think about this stuff. Wide receiver. Whenever I'm building my team, wide receiver, you can find some pretty good ones later in the draft. I think with my team, I could have gotten a better quarterback earlier to secure that spot, a better tight end earlier, and then you know, wide receivers are kind of a dime a dozen. Like if we look at the bottom of the draft board here, you can get guys like Adam Thielen and Hunter Renfrow, which are possible wide receiver twos right there. Um, much later in the draft, Brandon Cooks, guys that you are pretty sure are going to have a good season much later in the draft. So um, it's just something to think about when you're building teams. It's hard, but hopefully all that was helpful. Let me know what you think. See you guys.